Aloha, my loves, and welcome back to Soulful Wahine. If you're new here, my name is Kehaulani Dennis, and I work as a mental health therapist who specializes in relational trauma, attachment wounds, and inner child healing. This podcast is a space where we talk about healing relationships and becoming the version of ourselves that actually feels safe to live in. And today's episode is a very real and personal one. We're not going to be talking about other people. We're not going to be talking about what they did to us. For today's episode, we are going to be talking about me. And it's so funny, guys. I'm trying to be more personal, like trying to share more personal things and just really put myself out there, and I recognize that it kind of gives me anxiety. And so just thinking about how today's episode we're going to be talking about me. We're going to be talking about my patterns, my behaviors, my toxic traits in relationships. But here's the thing, we're not going to be talking about them today from a place of shame. Instead, we're going to be talking about them from a place of reflection and accountability. Okay? Before I hop into today's conversation, folks, I just want to go ahead and preface it with this. The version of myself that I am going to be talking about, she was not a bad person. I am not a bad person. However, I can now step back and reflect and look back at that version of myself and recognize that she was pretty unhealed. And I wanted to touch on that because I feel like for so many of us, that's where we can get stuck. Meaning, when we hear the word toxic, I don't know, guys, I can't speak for you, but for me, when I have been told that I was being toxic or when I have told that certain behaviors of mine were toxic, I got defensive. Okay? And I feel like that can be relatable for many people. You know, being told that we're being toxic, it can kind of put up a wall, kind of bring out defenses. And I just want to throw out there that having toxic traits or being toxic doesn't always look like manipulation or cheating in the relationship. Sometimes it can look like overreacting, shutting down, trying to leave before you get left, or staying longer than you should. And I say all of those things, folks, because that was me. As you listen to this episode, I want you to try to hear this through a lens of curiosity and not shame, and also through a lens of awareness and not self-attack. Because like I said in the beginning, I'm not looking back at my old patterns, shaming myself. No. I'm looking back at my old patterns so I can reflect and I can hold myself accountable and I can grow from those old behaviors. And as always, folks, the goal is not to sit here and beat ourselves up and be like, wow, I was horrible, or wow, I'm a terrible person because I did all these things, you know? No. The goal is to be able to say, okay, I see it now, I see my patterns, and I can begin to slowly choose differently. So now we're going to shift, and I'm going to go ahead and walk you through some of my biggest toxic patterns in relationships. I'll be honest with you, folks. I am still kind of working through some of these. I'm not going to point out which ones, but they're still a work in progress, some of these. And I'm only saying that because, again, I want to normalize the fact that I'm a human. I want to normalize the fact that even though, as a mental health therapist, even with all these skills and tools, I still come across my own challenges and I still come across my own emotions that sometimes make it hard for me to deal with them, or I don't really know how to cope. And so I just wanted to normalize that, okay? We are starting off with a big one, okay? One of my biggest toxic traits in relationships is that anytime there was a conflict, I would end the relationship. um, this isn't funny, guys. It's not. But I'm giggling because when I think back to how I used to operate and like just things I would do, I'm like, yeah, girl, these were definitely toxic. These were definitely not the best way to handle situations, you know? But yeah, I would end the relationship. And so I also want to clarify, like, I'm not talking about like I would end it because I'm sitting there thinking like, oh, this isn't healthy, like I need to walk away from this. No, guys, I mean literally like in the middle of an argument, in the middle of a disagreement, I would say things like, "Oh, I'm done. This isn't working. Like why are we even here? Like maybe we should just end this now." Like I literally would like end the relationship mid-argument. And the thing is in the moment, a lot of not even a lot of times, guys, like in the moment when I look back, every single time it felt justified because I would tell myself things like, they shouldn't be treating me this way or I deserve better than this. And the catcher, folks, because if I'm being truly honest, it wasn't always about respecting myself, but rather the fact that I did not know how to sit in discomfort. I did not know how to be uncomfortable. I did not know how to sit with uncomfortable feelings. And so my solution was, oh, we're having an argument, we're having a disagreement. We don't need to do this no more, my dude. Peace the fuck out. And the deeper truth, folks, is something I didn't realize was the fact that I wasn't ending the relationship necessarily. I was using that or I was doing that behavior to try and escape the feeling of being misunderstood, overwhelmed, or triggered. And I'm just going to be real with you all. Conflict did not feel safe to me. Like any type of conflict, whether it was a small thing, whether it was a big thing, it did not feel safe for me. And so instead of being able to work through it, I just tried to shut the whole thing down and end everything. And if you're like me, you know that shit don't work. I'm gonna call it for what it is, guys. At least I'm gonna call mine for what it is. It's avoidance. And I say that because I can recognize that when it comes to romantic relationships, I do have an avoidant attachment style. The more you know, right? Now I want to talk about the healed version because with me talking about this toxic trait, over time I have been able to work through these things and essentially kind of heal these parts of myself. And so now, healed me understands that conflict is not the same thing as being incompatible with someone. Just because something feels uncomfortable, that does not mean that it is wrong. And for me, now I know how to pause, regulate, and stay present in hard conversations instead of running from them or instead of just ultimately shutting them down and shutting the relationship down. Toxic trait number 2. Um, Again, my avoidant attachment style, guys, is very much highlighted in this one. I operated from the mindset of I am going to leave your ass before you leave me. And the thing is even if I didn't say it out loud or even if I like wasn't voicing that energy was always present. And for me, it showed up in ways like honestly, I would always have one foot out the door. I never would fully allow myself to relax into relationships. Um, I did a lot of like mental preparation for things to end or like for things to not work out. And honestly, a big way that my avoidance would show up is I would pull away from people or I would pull away from my person when things felt too real. I did these things because I feel like there was a part of me that was always thinking, this isn't going to last anyways. So why invest? Why try hard? You know? If I'm being completely honest, folks, my avoidance is rooted in fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of being blindsided. Um, I don't know, fear of giving my all and investing so much time and effort into someone and they might not even choose me in the end, you know? And so I would try to beat them to it. I like guys, I don't want you guys to think that I'm laughing because I find this funny. No, like I find my journey funny. Because again, when I look back at the unhealed version of myself, I can truly just see like, damn girl, like you were operating off of little to no knowledge of how to show up, you know? And for me, I had to accept and recognize that the reality is when you operate like this, when you operate from the mindset of I'm going to leave before you leave me, if when you do things like keeping one foot out of the door, you don't actually protect yourself. What's actually happening is you are actually sabotaging the relationship or you're sabotaging the situation before it even has a chance to be secure, to be real. And I had to learn that. I had to learn that me keeping one foot out the door was a part of the downfall of the relationships. Yeah. Healed me understands that not everything is meant to leave, meaning that I don't have to pre abandon myself or abandon the relationship in order to feel in control, you know? And nowadays, I kind of let things unfold, you know? Again, I try to stay present and I try to allow myself to be chosen without really trying to control the ending, if that makes sense. Toxic trait number 3. Ooh, folks, like I mentioned last time, I ignored red flags. I am a girl. Speaking of red, I am a girly that literally I would turn red flags green. And then I would tell myself that I was being understanding. No, bitch, you're making excuses. But I, guys, I literally would look red flags right in the fucking eyeballs and be like, nope. And the thing is I saw the inconsistency and I felt that things were off. I felt the misalignment. And for whatever fucking reason, folks, I continue to convince myself that it wasn't that serious, that those red flags were not that big of a deal. I would say things like, well, maybe they've just been through a lot, or they're trying, or, maybe they just need some time. And while some of that may have been true, it also caused me to then override my intuition. However, now that I have done some of the work, I am able to understand that empathy should never cost me my boundaries. Meaning that I can understand someone and still decide that we are not aligned. I can have empathy for someone's situation. I can have understanding for someone's situation and also recognize that I don't want to choose that for myself or I don't want to be a part of that. Now we're on toxic trait number 4. Okay, this one, guys, I lied. I know I said earlier that I wasn't going to tell you guys which ones I'm still working on. I am still working on this one actively. When I get overwhelmed or triggered, I shut the fuck down. Like, if any of you know me personally in my personal life, and if you have ever been around me when I shut down, when I shut down, this is not just me taking space. No, when I say I shut down, I literally mean that like I go quiet. I completely pull my energy back and remove it. I no longer communicate, like I go silent and I give the silent treatment. And I'm doing all of these things while expecting the person or the people around me to just figure it out. And guys, I recognize that this is a way of protecting myself. I don't know why I'm like on the verge of tears. I don't fucking get it. There's no reason for me to be crying, but it's like I shut down in order to protect myself. And while, yes, some can call this avoidance, I don't feel that my shutting down is avoidance. Um, because for me, I have always felt and learned that speaking up feels incredibly vulnerable. And as someone who feels that she can be so misunderstood at times, explaining myself feels so exhausting. And having to explain my feelings to people, it's so complex because it's like, I always tell people, like, I am not a surface level person. I'm not. I don't really give a fuck what you ate for dinner. Like, no. Tell me what the fuck traumatized you. Tell me why you act the way that you do, you know? And I recognize that for me, I am a very deep person and I seek out those deep connections because I so deeply just want to be understood. I so deeply just want to be able to share my feelings and have someone see me and not think that it's too much or think that my feelings are too big, you know? And so, combination of just recognizing that opening up equals vulnerability and explaining myself is so exhausting because a lot of times people don't understand me. People don't understand the depth of my emotions or why I feel things so deeply. And even with all of that, folks, I had to learn and recognize, though, that silence doesn't help anything. Silence actually creates distance and it takes away from understanding. It doesn't create any openings for understanding, really. And ultimately, it puts the other person in a position to where they are now guessing what's going on instead of being able to connect. Guys, being a therapist is so fucking weird because it's like I I can constantly hold space for other people's pain. I can hear some of the most traumatic and terrible things that have been done. But it's like for some reason sometimes when it comes to talking about my own stuff or when it comes to thinking about my own patterns or just things I've gone through, it's honestly hard to sit with. It's hard to hold space for. Yeah. Anyways, the healed version or the version of me that is working on healing right now, this trait, I have learned how to communicate more. I have learned how to communicate and learned how to speak up for myself, even when it's uncomfortable. And even when I don't have the perfect words to describe the situation. Because for me, again, I had to recognize that the connections I want in my life, they require expression, they require communication, and not complete withdrawal. And if I want to keep these relationships in my life, I need to do it. I need to be communicating and expressing my emotions. Last toxic trait I want to share with you folks. I would stay in situations a lot longer than I should have. And the thing is for me personally, guys, I don't even like the word should. I don't. Because for me, my mom always told me shoulda, coulda, woulda, but didn't. And I feel like the word should also opens up room for us to shame ourselves. And if you have been here long enough, you know that I am against shaming ourselves. And so, yeah, guys, I just recognized that I kept a lot of relationships and I stayed in connections a lot longer than what was best for me. And it wasn't because I didn't see the issues. No, again, the issues were there. Red flags right in my face. I just didn't want to accept them, you know? I just didn't want to look at the bad. And so some of the things that I would hold on to would be things like potential or history, or moments that felt good. And I would tell myself, like, well, maybe it'll get better. Or maybe we just need some time. And as time passes, things will improve. But the truth of all of that, folks, was what I really was doing was delaying the inevitable and honestly prolonging my own healing. Because for me, now I can understand that staying past alignment does not make me loyal. And it actually makes me unavailable for the things that are actually meant and aligned for me. I wanted to make this episode and share all of these things with you folks because I feel that it's so important that we begin to have these types of conversations. You know, it's very easy to sit here and talk about what other people have done to us. It's very easy to sit here and point out where we were hurt, where we were mistreated, and where things didn't feel fair for us. But real growth, folks, real growth and healing comes from being able to turn inward, look at our actions, and really ask ourselves, where was I showing up in ways that weren't healthy? What patterns am I still repeating? And what am I ready to take accountability for? Because, like I said, we can sit here and be like, oh, well, this person did this to me, this person did this to me. And while all those things may be true, at some point, folks, we have to turn inwards and recognize what the hell our role was in it. Even if our role was choosing to stay in it. Okay? And like I said, I don't like the word should because I feel like it just opens up so much room for shame, and this episode was not meant to shame myself, no. Like I said, we were examining my toxic traits through a lens of growth, accountability, and reflection. And unless we are willing to turn inwards, folks, our growth can be stunted. When we're able to examine ourselves and when we're able to ask ourselves questions and be honest without shame, without defensiveness, folks, that is where the change actually begins to happen. That is how we stop repeating the same cycles. That is how we start to show up differently. And that is how we begin to build relationships that feel healthy, secure, and aligned. Okay? Because again, the whole point isn't to shame ourselves, it's to really just look at our patterns and really examine, like, okay, yeah, this person is doing X, Y, and Z, but what am I doing about it? What is my role in all of this? On my journey of really just unlearning and healing and just trying to be like a better version of myself, folks, I had to realize that I was able to realize that none of my toxic traits actually came from a place of malicious intent. And honestly, they came from not feeling emotionally safe. They came from not knowing how to regulate my reactions. And ultimately, they stemmed from trying to just protect myself in ways that were actually hurting me, but I didn't realize they were hurting me. You know, in the moment, like I said, guys, I know myself. I recognize I have an avoidant attachment style. Like it's nothing new, you know? And so I had to recognize that the behaviors I thought were saving me, my avoidance behaviors of like shutting down and going quiet and silent treatment, I had to recognize that those things were actually harming me, not protecting me. And instead of shaming myself for doing those things, I was able to be like, you know what? No, this stems back to my attachment style. And when I look at my upbringing and my childhood, my attachment style makes sense. And so that's where I'm able to remove that shame cycle and actually give myself grace and be like, oh, yeah, you know, wasn't my best moments, not my proudest moments. But at the same time, I didn't know any better. And I was operating off of information that I thought, again, would protect me. I want to point out, folks, that that's the shift because I didn't just learn how to be better in relationships. No, I had to learn how to stay present. I had to learn how to communicate my feelings. I had to learn how to fucking regulate. Like, honestly, guys, because I feel my emotions so deeply, sometimes I have been able to recognize what I am capable of and the things that I am able to do. And I found myself in a lot of unsafe situations because of my big emotional reactions. And so I had to learn how to regulate my emotions and I had to learn how to choose myself without running away. Okay? As you're listening, I want you to just gently ask yourself, where do I shut down instead of speaking up? Where am I trying to control the ending? Where am I staying when I already know? Because awareness like this, my folks, my beautiful earthlings, this is how we break patterns. Not by judging ourselves, but by being honest enough to change. If this episode resonated with you, please go ahead and send it to someone who's also doing the work or someone who might need to hear this. Honestly, turning inwards, folks, it's really hard. Um, Especially if you've never been taught to show yourself compassion and grace. It is really hard to turn inwards because there is a lot of shame and embarrassment and judgment that comes up. And I just hope that through our journey together, we can begin to unlearn that. We can begin to unlearn that we have to shame ourselves for our past actions. We don't. We have to reflect, and we have to reflect honestly. Make sure you're following Soulful Wahine so that you stay updated on episodes and any new updates. And please know, folks, that I love you all and I am so proud of the work that you're doing. Until next time, mahalo and aloha.